All right, we're back on Morning Line, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday, talking education, schools, COVID. What we see happening right now, and a lot is happening with regard to schools closing, teachers and students getting sick, and whether or not you can balance all this out and continue educating the kids. Where do we go from here? It's a tough pickle right now. With us is Beth Brown from the Tennessee Education Association. Appreciate her joining us. And Beth, wanted to ask you a question about just the rubber hitting the road. As we sit here, considering, you know, the fact that teachers are getting sick and some teachers are having to cover for them and then students are out. I mean, at some point, you can go ahead and mandate and say, you know, no virtual schools. You're going to have, at some point, there's just not going to be the teachers there to teach them. I mean, you know, politicians say, you go do it, okay? We're not allowing you to do virtual and no masks. But if they all get sick, I'll tell you, if I was a teacher right now, I'd have a real problem under the current circumstances showing up to work. And I respect the heck out of these teachers because they're committed, but they're putting their own health at risk along with that of students if they're going in there and they're worried that it's spreading and there's sick kids there and no one's wearing masks. I'd have a real problem even showing up. And I know there are teachers out there right now thinking, you know what, maybe time for a career change.
Well, first, Nick, I want to thank you for the acknowledgement of the sacrifice, the resilience, the commitment of Tennessee's educators. I, as the president of the Tennessee Education Association, have been so proud to be a member of the education profession since the onset of this pandemic, when we see how educators have demonstrated their commitment to their students and their professional integrity. So thank you for that acknowledgement. The other thing that I think is really important for us to remember, you talked about how, you know, you can't keep schools open if our classroom teachers are not available to provide instruction, but we cannot forget about all of the other folks who keep our schools open, our education support professionals, from our cafeteria workers and our bus drivers and our educational assistants and our secretaries. All of these folks keep our schools open and running. And in fact, last week, I spent the entire week visiting schools and districts in East Tennessee, and on Friday at 6 o'clock in the morning, we got notice that the district we were set to visit that day had canceled classes because they couldn't get enough bus drivers. And so at 6 o'clock that morning, that superintendent had to cancel school for the entire district. And so it's not just a classroom teacher issue. If we don't have cafeteria workers to feed our kids, if we do not have bus drivers to transport them, then we can't have schools. And so that has to be part of the consideration as we're talking about any sort of plan or response to rising infection rates. It's not just about keeping teachers in the classroom, it's about everybody that keeps the system going. Yeah,
you make an excellent point, and you made an excellent point in the prior segment here where you talked about how without virtual on the table, you know, as you had last year, you have kids going home sick and they're doing nothing. They're not catching up. So I think it's probably safe to say, you know, you're only in first or second grade once unless you flunk and fall behind, and hopefully you're prepared to move on to third and fourth grades. But I mean, if this continues, there's a very real concern here, I would think, that these students are going to fall behind in terms of, you know, learning. They're just going to fall behind. They're not going to be up to snuff.
Yeah, I think it's exactly why it's so important for us to make sure that our district leaders and our school boards are empowered to make the decisions that they need to make. Because, you know, living and working in Nashville, I can't tell you exactly what is happening in my home district of Grundy County. I can't tell you what the needs are today, but the folks working there can. The ones who are in those schools, the members of the school board, the director of schools, they're the ones having to make those decisions. And that's the way it is in every single school district across the state of Tennessee. We need to make sure that we are letting them do the jobs that they need to do and empowering with the authority that they were granted by the people who elected them to school board.
And so I assume then you're saying that the concern right now, some of that empowerment's been taken away from them. And I'm sure you, like everyone else in the country, saw the embarrassing episode out of Williamson County where some of those school board members were confronted by, frankly, just fanatical, nutty parents making threats and the like. And I'm just wondering, when you see things get that heated and you have some parents that against the idea of mandating masks, I just wonder how you get past that.
You know, educators are committed to our students. We want to do what's best for them. We need the comfort and the knowledge that our districts have the ability to make the decisions that they need to do when we're thinking about whatever mitigation strategies or response to rising infection rates are available. You know, I think about right now with students who are having to go home for quarantine, educators who are being sent home because they have been exposed or infected. You know, districts need the ability to continue to provide instruction for our students, and that's something that's not happening right now. I know that on Monday, the Commissioner of Education said to directors of schools and superintendents, we're trusting local school districts to make the right decisions, and as you all are submitting waivers to the state regarding remote learning, we're trusting locals and their decision making. And then the very next day, you know, within the first 24 hours of the waiver option being available, waivers are being denied. That is not trusting our local folks. That is not trusting the people who are living and working in those communities. And if we're going to get past this, if we are going to get through this school year with as little disruption to student learning as possible and in as safe a manner as possible, it is absolutely critical that those who are living and working in those communities have the authority, have the ability to make whatever decisions are needed to make sure that students, educators, and all of their families are safe and able to do teaching and learning. That's the bottom line, Nick. That has to happen.
Gotcha. Let's take some phone calls for you. We'll go first to Tammy. Tammy, good morning. Hi, Tammy.
Hey, Nick.
Hey.
I've got an opinion about what might help this situation. Maybe not this year because this would probably take time. But it's time to take the classes back outside as much as possible. We've got the kids inside. Everybody's trapped inside. Back in the Spanish flu, they took the classes outside. There's CBS done a story even before COVID come up about schools without walls. I think Chattanooga has one. It's a really good idea that helps kids with physical activity. They learn biology. They have actual on-hand classes. They have to, you know, take scientific records of what their observations are about the world around them. And I just think that would help a lot of situations, including COVID right now.
Thank you for that. Certainly outside they consider to be safer than indoors. Obviously, the thing that immediately comes to mind with that, and it's a good idea, is weather and the conditions to be outside. But what do you think of what she's saying there? At least when you can, maybe trying to hold classes outside. I don't know how realistic that is for schools.
So it is a lofty goal. Certainly we recognize and doctors recognize that being outdoors poses less risk to students. That isn't always a possibility for our schools, but one of the things that they can be doing is, as districts are utilizing their federal aid dollars through ESSER 3, so the federal aid that's coming in from Congress to support districts as they're dealing with COVID and thinking about how to make sure that students are safe, healthy, and learning. Using those funds for updated ventilation is allowed. So if schools are having issues with safe and clean air, that is definitely something that they should consider using their ESSER 3 funds for, is improved ventilation systems.
All right, let's take a call from, I'm not sure if it's Tommy or Toby. Are you there, Tommy? Is it Tommy, Toby? Toby, are you there? Caller, are you there? We'll come back. You can check and see Mary Elaine if you're there. I know someone that's there is Ann. Ann, good morning. Hi, Ann.
Good morning. It was a no-brainer to me that 7 to 10 days after the large fair in Wilson County, that Wilson County schools were closed. And I wonder how many students from the counties that are closed now are out shopping and spending time socializing with their friends that are out of school because they're not in virtual classes right now because the waivers were denied. And it is absolutely impossible to do contact tracing on children that are going to school because it is impossible to trace where those students go home and where their family members have been. So contact tracing is just impossible to do on students in districts that are larger than county districts. So until we have in place a method for virtual learning to go into effect immediately when a system decides we can't have in-room classes, our students are going to be left alone to play. And that's exactly what is happening. Because when they are not in virtual classes and they are not in a classroom, they are socializing with their friends, which is exactly what I have nieces doing today and exactly what I had nieces doing yesterday in counties that were closed because they said they weren't sick, so they didn't need to stay at home.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of piggybacking on what you said earlier, Beth Brown, about the fact that there's no virtual learning, and as a result, when they're not at school for whatever reason, they're not learning at home, and, you know, Ann here saying they're out socializing with their friends, getting exposed.
Yeah, Miss Ann, I appreciate the concern. It's certainly a concern that the Tennessee Education Association shares, that our students who are sent home to quarantine by and large, and certainly districts who have had to use inclement weather days to close due to just large rates of infection and exposure, those students are sitting at home not learning, and that's not what anybody wants, and definitely not what our students need. The other thing that I would point out about your concerns that I share is, you know, we can't do it all in school. We can't mitigate all of the risk within school buildings. It is going to take every single Tennessean to be committed to taking measures to stop the virus where it is, to get our infection rates across the state under control so that we can keep schools open for in-person instruction for all students, because that is what is best for our students. It is what is best for our communities. It is certainly what is best for our state. So, you know, we are the volunteer state for a reason, and I wish that we would all embody that spirit and volunteer to do whatever it takes to make sure that our students can be in person, in school, safely.
Gotcha. Stay right where you are, Beth. We're going to take another break. More phone calls, more of our conversation with Beth Brown, Tennessee Education Association, right after this. Stay with us.